Pardon? Okay. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Alan Briggs. I'm the president of Bald Head Association. This is the annual meeting for 2022 for Bald Head Association. First, let me just identify for you what is the purpose of the annual meeting. Bald Head Association is a North Carolina corporation, and the laws of North Carolina require that there be an annual meeting for each not-for-profit corporation. In addition, our bylaws require an annual meeting for the members and specify that it'll be on the last Saturday of January of each year. And so that's why we're here. That's what we're doing. And the purpose, at least what we intend to do in the meeting and how we've generally used it, has been to explain to all of our members the activities of the last year. With that, let me ask that the PowerPoint be put up so all can see the PowerPoint. And this is a PowerPoint that we have prepared for the annual meeting. It will be on the website, so you can take a look at it there or print out a copy as you like. Initially, the first slide here is the board of directors. There are 6 members of the board of directors. They're all listed here, and they're all available here today, and we'll be chatting with you as well. The next slide, please. Next, we have the staff of Bald Head Association. We have an absolutely wonderful staff, and we're delighted with them. They've done superb work for you all year long, and you should feel free to call on them. They're here for all of us, but our thanks to them. The next slide. Proof of quorum. In order for us to proceed with the annual meeting, we are required to have a quorum. And we have a distinguished secretary who has been elected, served us honorably for several years, and he has done a diligent search to make a decision as to whether or not the quorum has been met. Let me call on Mr. Drumheller to report to us.
Thank you, Alan. I guess I'm on. I'm just going to read this. This is what we do every year for Article 3, Section 4 of the bylaws, the annual meetings, and all special meetings, the presence in person or by proxy of 150 entitled to be cast, or of the proxies entitled to cast votes shall constitute a quorum for any action except as otherwise provided in the Articles of Incorporation, the Declaration, and the bylaws. And the staff has advised that we have exceeded the 150 quorum requirement. So we're here in an official capacity with our annual meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. The next slide, please. Approval of minutes. The board has caused to be posted on the website, I think on Wednesday, the minutes from the last year's members meeting. It's there for all of you to review. The board members have reviewed it and have approved it. But by the same token, as you take a look at those minutes yourself, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to let us know. Next slide, please. Let me introduce to you the 2022 BHA board candidates. We are delighted to have 4 outstanding candidates that are running for the 2 available positions: Joe Bronner, John Kinney, Christine Osborne, and Bill Staten. Next slide, please. This is the call for election. I want to let you know that proxies have been received prior to this meeting. Online ballot is available today for anyone who has not already voted. The voting will be open until 10 a.m. You're required to deliver your completed ballot here to the Bald Head Association office. We have a distinguished teller committee who will, when the polls are closed at 10 o'clock, will tally the votes. And at the end of this meeting, I will report to you the winners out of these 4 distinguished candidates. Next slide, please. little background about who we are in terms of how many of us there are. Today we have 1,890 member properties. As you know, each property is entitled to a vote, and that's the size of us. It's split up in different ways. Rooftops, of course, are the ones where there's a home, individual home, house, and then there's lots, and the detail is here. You can look at it, but we are a large group. Next slide, please. Here is the question of why do we exist? What are our obligations? What are the obligations of Bald Head Association? For this, there are two main documents that you look at. They're all online for you to look at anytime you want, but I'll summarize the two here. One is the Articles of Incorporation. That is, when the corporation is formed, you file with the Secretary of State your Articles of Incorporation. And the second item that controls us are the declarations. That is, they're called declarations or the covenants. The words are synonymous. Articles of Corporation direct BHA to do these 5 things: to administer and enforce the architectural review guidelines, to own and manage the common area, to provide recreational services and facilities for the members, to communicate activities, decisions of interest to members, and to promote the health, safety, and welfare of members. They say it in a few more words, but that's essentially it. Next slide, please. This is from the covenants, and the section 2.1 of the covenants identifies the function of the association. Again, it says that in a little bit longer language, but it comes down to essentially the same thing. The first one I'll read to you, but sometime when you have time, go back and look at these documents. They're very significant for us. But the first one is the association will be responsible, A, to act on such matters as the board determines affects the welfare and recreation of its members and the beautification and conservation of the natural environment of the properties. And I have ellipses there because there's a little more there, but that's the essence of it. Look at all of them. The next items I will get into will be kind of discussing what we have done this year to meet those obligations. Next slide, please. The first one I identified was to administer and enforce the architectural review guidelines. I believe this to be the single most important thing we do. And it requires significant work from many, many volunteers who do an absolutely incredible job. I've gone to so many of their meetings, and I'm always in awe of the talent that we have there, the dedication they provide to their job, and the fine work they do for us. What we've done is this year enforce violations of the covenants and design guidelines, facilitate and review property owners' submittals in accordance with the BHA covenants and design guidelines, and we maintain archives of plans and paint colors on over 30 years and 116 drawers of house plans. Next slide, please. These are a listing of some of the specific activities in which the ARC has done this year. There have been 22 ARC meetings. And as I say, I've been to these meetings. These are not 5-minute meetings. 2 days ago, there was a 5-hour meeting that I attended, and that is not all that uncommon. And almost all of these members stay through the meetings and work hard. They have reviewed 416 submissions. The staff reviews them, and the volunteers review them. 42 new construction projects, 29 approved, and remaining in process are 30, which this is a 32% increase from 2020. Met with the BH landscaping contractors, and I won't read all of these. You can read them again at your leisure, but I just can't emphasize the quality and commitment of these folks. Next slide, please. Own and manage the common area. Again, this is a very significant responsibility. This is what I identify in my own mind as the second most significant responsibility we have. There's an awful lot of common area we own. We, the association, and it's the beautiful common area on Bald Head Island, and it's our job to take care of it. There's common area at Keeper's Landing, Surfman's Walk, and Summers Crescent that they manage. We manage that. We manage the amenities or assets of 6 additional neighborhoods, 13 alleys we maintain on the east end for alongside 125 individual properties. And then there are the trees, the wonderful trees that we have on the island. It's our responsibility to manage and see the trimming is done properly and appropriately, and connect our uniqueness, protect our uniqueness. Next slide, please. We have now 3 pictures of the overall island maps that show you in highlighted colors where the common areas are. There are a lot of them. This is the whole island. Next slide, please. And this is just the west end of the island, again, highlighted in green. There's a map in the BHA office, a large map you're always welcome to take a look at if you desire. Next slide, please. And this is the east end. You'll see the large one there, I think is Keeper's Landing. And there are multiple others highlighted there, each of which is a responsibility for staff and us to cause to be maintained properly. Next slide, please. Provide recreational services and facilities for members. And that is they facilitate the use of the association centers for meetings, recreational facilities, weddings, and other activities. Manage the common areas for property owners' use, and others are listed there. But it's recreational services. Again, going back to the Articles of Incorporation and the Declaration as to what are we supposed to do. This is one of the things we're supposed to do, and this is what we do in doing that. Next slide, please. And another really significant responsibility is to communicate to our members, our 1,900 members, what it is we are doing and activities that are of interest or we believe to be of interest to the members. Many of our members live on the island, but most of them don't. They're not here full time. It's our job to communicate to them. And we have one staff member, Pam Henston, who is really her primary responsibility is to oversee and cause to happen this activity of communication. And I must tell you, she's there 24/7 for all of us. And this year you have noticed, I'm sure, the compass, which comes to you via email and provides as prompt of information as we can get to you to keep you up to date on what is happening. In addition to that, there's the island reports, the breakfast with BHA. We've tried to have quarterly meetings this year in the overall desire to be sure you know that we are transparent as to what we're doing to you and for you. And we hosted the village councils. But these are all listed here again. Take a look at them, but this is the communication responsibility. Next slide, please. Promote the health, safety, and welfare of the members. Now that's sort of a broad topic. It's not, and so we have to really examine it each year to say, what should we be doing to fulfill that responsibility? And we do that, and the board thinks about that, and the board discusses. And then it's the staff and responsibility to really carry that out. Take a look at this. We attend island entity and off-island meetings to keep property owners abreast of what's going on, help property owners navigate the ins and outs of property ownership on Bald Head Island. This year, there were a record number of 280 welcome packages delivered to new property owners versus the 247 in 2020. In 2020, as you all know, was a record number because of the pandemic. Additionally, we utilized the BHI basics. I don't know whether you've ever seen that handout, but it is to sort of, in as simple a form as possible, let new people and us old people know what are the basic things you ought to know to function properly on Bald Head Island. We think it's an excellent piece of work that Pam really put together with the others' help and the board, but it's been available and it gets distributed. Next slide, please. Covenants enforcement. And that's the enforcement of the covenants. We do it to help maintain property values, keeping the island looking the beautiful way our developer developed it for us and has been developed since, is in the best interest of all of us. This year, there were 21, there were 41 total violations that were identified, and additional 34 of the community-wide standards. Each of those identify areas where houses need work, and it's our job, pursuant to the articles and the covenants, to see that that gets done. Next slide, please. Let me now get into the committee work. As you know, we have committees of volunteers that really carry out so much of the bulk of our work. And for each of the committees, we have a liaison from the board that really oversees and works with that committee. For the Architectural Review Committee, it has been John Kinney. And I'd like to ask John, assuming all the Zoom works here, for John to advise us about the Architectural Review Committee. John, can you do that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, as Alan mentioned earlier, 2021 was a record year. It is the largest number of submissions ever received by the ARC, and 2020 was also a large year, so we were 32% up from 2020. These committees are staffed by volunteers, and as Alan mentioned, they work a lot of hours on behalf of all the members to process these applications and attend the meetings. They are broken down into two sections, A and B. You can see what's covered by each of those. Generally, Section A covers the west part of the island, and B covers the east part. Next slide. These are the 2021 ARC members. Most of these people are continuing with ARC, which we appreciate very much. We also have one new person joining, Terry Steelman, who will be a section chair. He has previously served on the ARC, and he is a practicing architect, by the way. So these people put in a lot of work on our behalf, and we very much appreciate their time. Each of the sections has at least one meeting per month. Next slide.
The next slide is the Finance Committee, and Robert Drumheller is our chair of the Finance Committee, and I'd like to ask Robert to speak to us about the work of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Alan. So the Finance Committee meets periodically during the year, and conceptually they look at what I'll call recurring issues, things that we have to deal with every year, and then unique issues depending on specific things that may come up in a given year. Here's a kind of a list of things that we typically do, some recurring, some unique. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I would like to just mention briefly 3 of them. So the first bullet, which is obviously a recurring issue, is every year we provide input to the budget. We did so again for 2022. The 5th bullet down on the asset reserve study, we did our first asset reserve study, which was commissioned and sent to us in December of 2020. We didn't really have enough time to digest all of the implications about that. And so we spent some time this year trying to fully contemplate what the ramifications were and what we would do about it. We'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. And then the last one I wanted to mention is underneath that, we identified and recommended to the board for approval a new auditor for our financial statements. The auditor that we had in the past had been working for us for, I think, 11 years and was doing a great job, but industry best practices generally suggest that you either replace your audit company or your audit partner within a larger company roughly every 5 or 6 years. And so we definitely felt that it was time to move to a new auditor. So we did what's called a competitive RFP, request for proposals. And we got, I think we put out a request for 4 proposals, but we got 3 in, and the board the committee made a recommendation to the board for approval. So we have a new auditor in place who will be auditing our statements moving forward.
Thank you, Robert. Jennifer Lucas, a board member, has been the liaison to the Finance Committee and could equally have reported to you on that. But since we have the chairman on the board here, I thought I'd let Robert speak. Next slide, please. The Resource Conservation and Beautification Committee, Tiffany Williams is the chair, and Tiffany and John Kinney have equally been active on that. And Tiffany, who would you prefer report on this?
Well, since John's the one who's been getting his hands dirty, he'd probably be the best person to give an update on that.
All right, John, would you be kind enough to do that?
I'd be happy to. So as you may be aware, we began a program called Reforest after Hurricane Florence because of all the trees that we lost. We've done that now for 3 years. This was the 3rd year. And we have, this year we planted 57 trees with the help of many volunteers and the many of the members of the RCB committee. In addition to that, we facilitated a bulk discount for property owners who wanted to buy trees because we were bringing over a large amount of trees and bushes on a large truck. So we brought over some more for the homeowners. We also planted a memorial tree for Nana Smith, who's a former board member. We had one litter sweep that Kay Mank organized. With COVID, that was as much as we could do. Normally, it's 2 per year, and you can see the members of the committee listed there. Next slide. So here's
John, this is you again.
Yeah. Thanks, Alan. So here are some pictures of the volunteers who came out and helped. We with all the help that we had, we really got this done very, very quickly. And we've had I would note, we've had a very high success rate with the trees surviving. About 95% of all the trees planted have survived and are growing. And also Pam Rainey managed the installation of some landscaping plants in Surfman's Walk and Keeper's Landing, and that really beautified the area down there. So we're quite happy with that. I would also note there is an online map of honor trees. Members can purchase a tree and have it planted in honor of an individual, and those are recorded. And Pam Henson takes care of that recording and has those on a online map that you can view on the BHA website.
Thank you, John. Next slide, please. The SER committee. Jennifer is the chair of the SER committee, and with the pandemic, it's been of a challenge for the year, but nonetheless, Jennifer, if you'd be kind enough to speak to this committee, I would appreciate it.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Clearly, a lot of the activities have been constrained because of the unpredictability of what we're operating in, but we have been able to get some classes in for the summer, and we had the Smith Island Social plan, but that was going to be rescheduled. We anticipate that this year will be a reinvigoration of the activities, and really appreciate the leadership of the team here. Just want to note one thing on the ballot today is to rename this committee. You know, I know that there are a few people, particularly the chair of this organization, is interested in simplifying the mission of this group. But I do believe it contributes to the support of the wellness and the health activities that the organization is commissioned to do, and we're looking forward to a more vigorous 2022.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Next slide, please. The Long Range Planning Committee is essentially what we call a think tank for Bald Head Association. Peter Mink has served as our chair this year, and Peter and the committee have done an outstanding job. We have had several complex issues that have been presented to the board. And when we get that, we call on the Long Range Planning Committee. It's a Strategic Planning and Long Range Projects Committee. Again, is up for a name change this year just because it's a long title, but it's the Long Range Planning. And their work has been outstanding. And essentially what we do is we ask them to take a look at this issue, whatever the issue is, and they then study it and they then give recommendations to us. Peter then many times records it in a memo and gives a memo to us. And let me tell you, we've got one of the finest and clearest thinking writers on the island in Peter Mink. So if you need help, he's one of the best legal minds and writers that you'll find among our world here. But that's the Long Range Planning Committee. Next slide, please. Community-wide Standards Committee. The community-wide standards are standards that were adopted by the board in, I think, 2018, July, or I think September of 2018. And the work had been carried out by the staff. The staff had done an excellent job in doing the work, which essentially involves going around the island and identifying homes in which it appears they're falling below the community-wide standards, and taking appropriate action to cause them to be brought up to standards. But the work was significant, and the staff time, of course, calls for staff members who we pay, and therefore a significant issue in our budget. So we looked at the issue of having it done by a committee instead of the staff, in order to reduce the economic cost to the association as a whole. I looked up and down the East Coast and talked with a number of homeowners associations to see how they dealt with this issue, and a number of them really had used committees, volunteer committees, and I really explored how that worked and was quite satisfied with that. And with that, we adopted an ad hoc committee this year, and Deborah Drumheller has been chairing that committee, and we have other members on there. They're all listed, and they have done an outstanding job this year. So much so that we suggested we move it from a ad hoc committee to a full covenants committee, and that's one of the items you all voted on. And the main reason for that, as I say, is to reduce the costs that they, as part of the costs incurred by BHA, and therefore keep your dues down. They've done first-class work, and I'm delighted with them. Next slide, please. There's the covenants require three covenants, or the bylaws, I forget. I think this is actually the bylaws. The 3-year term limit on committee members. They can re-up for another 3 years if they want. Some choose to, some don't. They're here. We have a list of people whose terms have expired. Some may re-up, but they put in 3 honorable years, and I really want to ask you to take a look on here. And if there are people you know and see, thank them when you see them. They've done good work for you, and your appreciation to them would be appropriate. Next slide, please. And by the way, we need volunteers. It is the heart and soul of how we operate, volunteers, and we need your help. And in order for you to become a working volunteer, what all you need to do is fill out a committee volunteer form. It's on the web. You can print it off there, or you can email to Diane Maceras here. There's her email address, and ask for a form, fill it out, send it in to us. The board will act on it, and will do their best to get you assigned to whatever committee you are interested in. There are limits on the number of people on each committee, but we do our best to get people allocated to the committees on which they like to serve. And we need your help, so I encourage you to do this. Next slide, please. One of the things we did last year at the retreat, and that is in February each year, we have a retreat, and the board does, and kind of sits down and focuses on what needs to be done. And we try to identify what are priorities, what are the most important things we need to put our attention to this year. And we came up with 7 that we focused on. We each of the monthly meetings, we'll discuss how are we doing on with our priorities, our most important things. There's always other things that come up throughout the course of the year that require attention, but we want to say, do we still have our eye on the ball that matters? And these are the ones we've talked about before. You probably heard us talk about them, so I won't talk more about them, but that's what it is. Next slide, please. Wildlife Overlook was our first priority. And John Fisher, who is completing 6 honorable years of serving on our board, has really assumed the primary responsibility to see that Wildlife Overlook got completed. And he's monitored the cost, and well, it costs money, and it's significant. It's such an important project for us. John really assumed the responsibility to follow it all the way. So I'd like John to speak to this Wildlife Overlook. Are you on mute? Okay. I cannot.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Sorry for that. In keeping with our charge as far as providing for the membership, recreational wise, educational wise, et cetera, at our 2019 annual meeting, we had some lengthy discussions and review about the Wildlife Overlook that had been damaged over the last couple of storms, and its age was starting to represent itself not so well for us and became unusable. At that time, the membership and attendance and those around unanimously decided we absolutely want this overlook rebuilt, put back together, et cetera. So those things taken into consideration, a lot of research, a lot of development and time inserted here. We decided and determined as a board that we needed an architect to properly draw this, bring it out, look at all the safety aspects, keeping in mind, again, primarily safety, the educational aspect of this, as well as longevity, something that would be serving our community and our members for many, many years to come. In front of you are the final basic numbers of this particular overlook. The budget was about $350,000. We came in at $340 as a total at the bottom. The breakdown is there in front of you. I would recognize Trinity Builders did a phenomenal job in providing a master craftsman out there for us that basically with minimal help of others, almost single-handedly put this up for us. We researched, designed, developed the stainless hardwares, et cetera. Keeping in mind, again, a primary aspect of safety, that design changed considerably for that aspect. We do have many school bus loads of children that come over, their field days, et cetera. So the bottom line is this is our final cost. The project is completely built with the exception of a final parking area. That final parking area is on hold pending the completion of Duke Energy's upgrading of our electric grid system. There is a switch box on the property, and once that switch box has been finally initiated and put into service and located, the old box will be removed. At that point, we will finish and finalize a parking area that is more conducive to stopping, visiting, and enjoying the wildlife overlook. So we're happy to present that to the folks as well as an educational and recreational facility. And it seems to be exceptionally well received. So thank you to all, and please enjoy it. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, John. And again, John, thank you for your outstanding work on the wildlife overlook. Next slide, please. The overall financial stewardship of your money, you, all the members, you give us a lot of money because we ask you to give it to us, maybe require you to give it to us, but nonetheless, you give us a lot of money. So an overall financial plan for managing it is critical. Robert Drumheller, again, our treasurer, is in charge of that, and I'd like Robert to address that issue.
Thank you, Alan. A couple of comments on this slide about our philosophy of financial stewardship. First bullet just shows that we've increased dues about 4 times since 2013 to cover our costs. We basically do a budget where we determine what the cost structure is, and then the dues are designed to cover exactly the cost structure. We're not in business to collect dues to make quote unquote some type of profit. Second bullet, we're debt free, which is good. We don't have any debt. All of our assets we own outright. We're not paying anybody any interest expense. Third bullet, we have today roughly $665,000 in reserves. We'll talk about the reserves issue in a minute or two. And then there's a last bullet down at the bottom, which I talked about, is we conducted our first ever professional reserve study. And we're going to talk about the ramifications of that in a second. Next slide. So this is a slide with some charts and some numbers. The chart on the left side, the annual basic dues increases, shows you the trend in the dues from 2017 through 2022. On the right side, you see the annual budget each year. The only thing I'll say on this slide with the annual budget is in 2019, the budget doubled. That's because of the merger. And then basically the baseline was twice what it was before the merger. Going back to the slide on the left, where you see the increases in dues in 2021 from 390 to 450 and 2022 from 450 to 495 was essentially driven primarily by the implications of the reserve study, which we'll comment on in a moment, and secondarily by increased staffing. Next slide. Okay, so on the reserve study, we got the study late in 2020. It made the study identified the assets, made a determination of what it would cost to replace the assets, and came up in each case with a recommendation about what should be the annual amount of cash set aside as a reserve for a particular asset going forward each year. So we implemented part of the study in the budget, incorporated it in the 2020 budget, but there were a few areas that we kind of punted on, deferred on, because we wanted to do some additional analysis. And those were primarily common assets, the Association Center, the boat park, and a number of the master walkways. And those we looked at in more detail in 2021 and have come up with a plan to deal with those. Next slide, please. All right, so basically what happened was for the Association Center, the Master Walkway, and for Battery 4, the study really concluded that we were significantly underfunded and under-reserving for those assets. And if you look at the difference between what we were reserving for and what the study recommended, it was a pretty substantial increase in annual reserves. And we thought, given the size of the increase, that the best thing to do was to try to spread it out over a period of years, so that the dues would not go up by a very large amount one particular year. So what we ended up doing was we looked at that difference between what we were reserving annually, what the study recommended the annual reserves would be, and we created like a kind of a ladder that each year over the next 5 years, we would increase the reserves for the Association Center, the Battery 4, and the Walkway a little bit, so that at the end of the 5th year, which we're defining now as 2025, we would get to the level that was actually implied in the study. So there's been a gradual increase reflecting this difference in the 21 budget, the 22 budget, and you will see for the next 3 years a continuing gradual increase for the years 2023, 24, and 25. As going forward, then we'll continue to maintain and update the reserves as required. We'll probably update the reserve study every 5-6 years. That's typically what's done in industry best practices. And for a project for 2022, we're hoping to come to some longer term resolution about lagoons. We actually share common ownership with a number of lagoons with the BHA club, and in a few cases we share common ownership with the villas. And I think our view is we ought to have what I'll loosely call a three-way conversation between the association, the BHI club, and the village to try to figure out, is there one of those entities that it really makes sense should really own and manage those lagoons? And if that's the case, that we all agree that it should be X rather than shared ownership, create a plan to try to transition ownership of those lagoons to the entity that probably makes the most sense to own it. So we're hoping to get together with the 3 parties and have a discussion about what's the best long-term plan for lagoon ownership.
Thank you, Robert.
I think that's the last slide. Thank you.
Next slide, please. On the horizon, that is for the future. What are our plans and where are things going? Again, we're developing the long-range term strategy for lagoons as has been identified. And we're publishing a BHI community directory. That is something that Pam Henson has been working on for a year and a half, maybe 2, and that is transitioning a overall directory from the Conservancy, which they asked then if we would be willing to take it over. We've been working on doing that. I say we, and I mean Pam, and that's just about to happen. In February, I think that is going to come out, and you will each receive one and can purchase more if you want. The whole schedule will be available, but that project's coming to a conclusion. Additionally, migrating to a revamped website and owner portal combination is going to take place, completing turning over our maintenance responsibilities for alleyways. I guess that's the same as alleys, but that's what we have, to the village, conducting community-wide standards evaluations, and then celebrating our 40th anniversary. That's the upcoming year. All will be accomplished within the next week or a year or 2. Next slide, please. We are fortunate to have with us today the representatives of most of the major organizations on the island, in which they can give us an overall update from their particular organization. Mayor Quinn is our first representative, and I'd like to call on our good mayor to give his update to us.
Can you hear me now? Okay, could you turn that on? First, I want to say I'm excited to be here. My intention is to be brief, but there are some key points that I think I'd like to make. I realize many of you listening may not have read letters I wrote during the election. I'm not going to bother you with those now and read them, but I'm going to reference the last letter and specifically 5 areas of focus. that I said we'd be prioritizing. These areas remain my commitment to each stakeholder on the island: residential, commercial, nonprofits, and specifically the last area of focus, which I defined as governing this island with transparency, inclusion, civility, and collaboration, is what the village commits in practice to every venture we have. One favor I have as I give my first update to the POA, please understand the council is running as fast as we can. I think we're making great strides, but it's only been a month and a half. So the first area that I wanted to talk about is protecting the foundation of the island. The following efforts are essential, well-established, and need constant attention. And they have been getting that attention for years, but we need that attention to sustain the island. The first, shoreline stabilization. I want you to know that we have engineers continuously monitoring and advising us on beach erosion and accretion. We're maintaining relationships with the Corps of Engineers to ensure that we have a cycle of sand replacement every couple of years. And we're continuing the permitting process we have in process right now for the Frying Pan Shoals Barrow site. Our wastewater treatment plant, we crossed the line this year. We're at 80% capacity, and we've started design for the expansion. We've also initiated a program of repair, replacement, and upgrading the monitoring technology for our different lift stations around the island. Public Works is expanding their stormwater management. We're monitoring where we have flooding situations, and we're working with the BHA club in our lagoon connections and outfall. Public safety, the latest fire just showed how vulnerable we are. We're establishing a list of critical additions to both equipment and staffing. Second, the second area that I wanted to consider is an island with a shared vision and shared and clear vision. There are two There's two key components there's two key components in that effort. First, the village need to responsibly complete the projects we started. We have to repair the construction sites, establish new practices to ensure we protect the natural environment we're disrupting as we go along. We've invested in the training and certification of a village arborist. We're in the process of vetting qualifications of landscape architects to develop ongoing relationships. And we've started discussions with the POA and limited to support our editing and standing up of commercial guidelines. We've committed to working with the POA's Committee on Resource Conservation and Beautification. I'm really happy. I got to talk to Kay Menk, and we're trying to set up a meeting. One of the things we're looking at is studying the feasibility of a germination and reclamation garden. And we've targeted a series of backlog projects, screening the trash compactor and the contractor yard, and landscaping the public safety building. The second component of this is planned growth. We're only a little bit more than half built out. So there's going to be new demands on our limited resources. We need to start taking that into account now. If we're going to keep the character of our community. A very high priority is to continue engagement with limited and identifying permits, properties, domain rights, copyrights, and even standing up codes and laws that are drawn up but not yet approved. It is a very large and time-sensitive task, but I think the island will benefit greatly from the investment of effort. We must start master planning for the future to enhance all the zoning and density. This includes work on our island transportation, always a topic of conversation, but the speed limits, ice vehicles, and even possibly road limitations have to be considered. We have scheduled meetings with individuals that are currently engaged in commercial projects with a goal to plan public access and interconnectedness. We're structuring studies for the upcoming season to assess toilet facilities, beach access, beach parking problems and related safety issues. We're going to study construction targets, identifying which neighborhoods are nearing completion or expecting infill, and work on plans to minimize the disruption from deliveries and material laydown. There's 3 key master plan studies that need to be initiated in the immediate future. Marina Gateway, I'm naming these things, so you're not going to find them somewhere else. But the Marina Gateway is a pedestrian connection to the village center. It hopes to address marina improvements, incorporating the proposed Lighthouse Museum, and enhance the historic district plan. The second one is a Conservancy Gateway development. I want to try and establish the Conservancy as an island landmark. And the third is an Edward Teach Maritime Way. It's basically a commercial professional district, which is what it was zoned for. The third area that I want to address right now is that the island must control and be responsible for its infrastructure. Now, before I get into any kind of discussion about the ferry and transportation system and the status of those negotiations, let me say that there are many other key items that the council is working on with staff to ensure our roads, right-of-ways, utilities, public safety, fire preparedness, and standard building maintenance remain strong. I can't thank Chris enough and his staff for all the work they've done on these things and many more. Now, just to discuss the surrounding sale of the transportation system, the ferry, barge, tram, parking, it continues. I ask your patience as we sort out through the details of this transaction. It's large. The village is committed to the protection of all the users of the system. And toward that end, we are proactively developing simultaneous positions and strategies for any eventuality, whether it's the TA, the village, or even a third party acquiring the system. This time, I really want to specifically thank Scott Gardner, Jerry Maggio, and Mike Brown, who are all, they might be council members, they're all volunteers though, for their extraordinary efforts in trying to make this happen. I hope by the end of the next quarter, I'll have a more definitive message that I can give. My fourth point was to emphasize how important that we continue to retain the talented village staff we have. Our strength as an island is where, with your input, the village is managed and protected by excellent employees. The village staff is doing an analysis of workload, expansion needs, and bottlenecks. Human resources is now focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have instituted new social media standards and also instituted sensitivity training. On top of the day-to-day of this island, Chris is making sure we're strategically we're ready from all aspects for the growth that's going to continue. I want to stress that the village elected officials do not run this island. Our staff does, and they do it extraordinarily well. We should be grateful for them. My fifth and final priority is to govern this island with transparency, inclusion, civility, and collaboration. If perception is that it isn't happening, and you're sure it isn't. So I'm spending additional time that I have on these areas. And I believe as these principles are that these principles are the true soul of our island. We have a focus on continuing to strengthen relations with all island entities, including the POA, the Conservancy, Limited, the Lighthouse, the Chapel, and the clubs. We recognize the need to understand all stakeholder positions. Toward this end, we've already created a group that had their first meeting this week to study and make recommendations for establishing a voice for all stakeholders, voters and non-voters alike. They'll be reaching out to you, so please support them. The village is committed to working collaboratively with all island businesses, and we must foster more volunteerism. I believe that in the openness and frank honesty that we're going to be portraying, that it'll empower people to show up. And we must have a common agenda. There's a distinction between transparency and executive sessions. The latter is needed in order to have confidential conversations about items similar to personnel and property acquisition. But I'm committed to delivering direct communication and review and take away any fear and false messaging. I'm prepared to start making quarterly mayoral messages. Hopefully they're not as stilted as this one, but we'll work on it. And we're also going to be initiating essential services sessions, a semi-annual clarification and education event. In closing, I just want to thank the POA and tell them how grateful I am for giving me this opportunity. I specifically want to thank Carrie Moffett and her staff, along with the POA chair, Alan Briggs, whom I consider a good friend, for their devotion and service to the island. I want to tell you there's so much more to say, but I don't want to overstay my welcome. Please know that over the course of my term, I'll be reaching out through committees and personally to work with all interests on this special island. And let me end by asking two favors of you. First, I want you to hold me, the council, and our staff to these commitments. And I ask you to work with us to make the island an even better place than it is now. I think it's corny, but the future can be even brighter if we're working together. One last thing I want to make a note is we have our council meeting, our retreat on February 18th. Everybody is invited. The different groups, the engineers, our Washington consultants and lobbyists, each department head, and the manager and myself will be making reports, a lot more detailed, very similar to what you're doing today. And I invite you to come. It will be taped, and so you'll be able to listen to it on your own schedule. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Quinn, for your inspirational presentation. We're delighted to have you on board. Next, let me call on Chris Webb on behalf of the Old Baldy Foundation. Chris, are you available?
Yes, I'm right here. Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everybody. I think I have a PowerPoint that Carol is probably trying to get up. At any rate, I can start. Oh, do you have? Oh, there we go. Okay, next slide. So obviously 2020, and I had technical difficulties last year, so I was not able to present, but there was not a lot to report in what I call the year of COVID. 2021 brought operations back at 100%. We had a record-breaking year in 2021. We saw 28,558 visitors. Versus the year of COVID, we had 4,212 visitors. And our next best year was 26,089 visitors, and that was the year of our 200th anniversary in 2017. Next slide. As many of you know, we've had several false starts and design issues with building a new interpretive center for Old Baldy. Many of you might realize that we have extremely limited space. We have staff working remotely because there's no space for them to work on our property. So in 2021, Robin and Mark Prack generously bought this tract of land across the street from the Keeper's Cottage. And they have donated this land to the Old Baldy Foundation. There will be a conservation easement on part of the land to protect the trees. We've been working with the village. Peter brought up the idea of the Marina Gateway. So we're in the very early stages of a planning process. We want to look at vehicular, pedestrian access, but from the marina, and how this will affect the village center. We are right now doing a spatial analysis of how much space we're going to require in order to have all of our archives, our Fresnel lens exhibited, and a gallery space in order to have better exhibits and displays to tell the story of the history of the Cape Fear region and predominantly Bald Head Islands. Next slide, please. Just a short update on, we have been approved for a grant from the National Park Service. It came out of Hurricane Florence. This grant is funded by the National Park Service, but it is being managed by the Department of Cultural Resources and the State Historic Preservation Office. They are woefully behind in getting the contracts out to the 23 recipients. And they, all of the bureaucracy and approvals and permitting that these grants have to go through, we have yet to receive the contract, but it's coming. The idea is to do more extensive exterior work, do some work at the base of the lighthouse on the earthen, what we call a glacis wall, and hopefully we'll return that wall to its original state, which is a sloped mortar, for lack of a better word. The original one was ballast stone and construction debris topped by mortar. And the idea is to keep water shedding away from the foundation of the lighthouse. So those are the three major things, and there may be funding left over to do some interior improvements. Next slide, please. We did apply for and receive a, from the Historic Wilmington Foundation. We'll be putting this historic marker inside the lighthouse for lack of any other location for it. But Travis Gilbert, our previous employee, is now the executive director of the Historic Wilmington Foundation. And it's a very extensive application process. And these plaques are coveted by historic landmarks throughout the area. Next slide, please. So field trips were canceled due to COVID-19, but I am very happy to report that we now have 7 elementary school 4th grade classes scheduled to come this spring. We have a program called the Lighthouse Learners. It's a scholarship to fund these children to come over here to the island. We do accept private donations for this fund. It's totally, these are predominantly Title I schools where the children have subsidized meals and ordinarily could not afford to make the trip over. The 4th graders study North Carolina history, and lighthouses are part of that curriculum. So we're happy to see that come back. We hope there's no other variant that prevents us from welcoming these children back to the island. We do seek volunteers for these programs. If you want to schedule, it's about a 3 to 4 hour commitment, usually on a Wednesday or Thursday. With 150 children is a lot to wrangle. So we do have the Conservancy, thanks to Chris Shank and his staff, who also participate in these programs. So they learn a little bit about the environment as well as the history of the island. Okay, next slide. Our staff continues to complete the cataloging process, and I'm happy to say we're probably about 90% there. The next slide, please. Everything is digital. including our subject files. So thousands of pages of documents and information about the island have been scanned. If you go to this website or our website and click on the history tab, you can search for almost anything you want. And if it's in our files, it will pop up and you'll be able to see a photo of it. Or if it's subject files, it will take you to a Google Drive and you will be able to read most anything about the history of the island. So it's a great, useful tool. And we have had a lot of people in the general public use it for their research. Next slide. We did during COVID apply for 2 different PPP loans and both of them were forgiven. I think the total we got between the 2 loans was close to $100,000. It helped to pay for payroll. And obviously that enabled us to keep everybody employed during the pandemic. Next slide, please. We are going to be hopefully reinventing some of our events and having them this year. We lost a lot of events and fundraisers to COVID. Next slide. We did hold the 4th of July parade last year. We had well over 100 carts and it was a great event for the whole island. Actually, it was very successful. Next slide. We did have National Lighthouse Day, which includes a 5K, 10K run for the light. We had living history, playing games with kids, and we also had a marketplace. Next slide. We held our historic happy hours, socially distant. The one on the bottom is we brought in an author, Jeremy Moss from Northern Virginia, who gave a lecture on his book about Stede Bonnet. We held another one at the association building, but those are monthly series that we usually do at the base of the lighthouse. But last year, because of lack of staffing, I'm sure some of you noticed this tent was there for quite a long time. That was because of weddings and they didn't have enough staff to put up and down these tents. So we allowed them to leave it there, but we made use of it while it was there. Anyway, next slide. We did have North Carolina Marketplace 2 times last year, one in June and one in August. It's very, very successful. We bring over local vendors from the Southport and Wilmington area. This on the bottom is a farm called Changing Ways, and he brings over organic meats and vegetables, chicken, pork, beef. We also have Bald Head Island coffee and other vendors. This on the top is a woodworker who makes cutting boards and things like that. They give a portion of their proceeds to Old Baldy and they pay us a vendor fee to come over. So it's been very successful. A lot of people would like us to do it every month. We just don't have the staff or the volunteers in order to do that, but it's a great event, something a little bit different for the community. Next. And finally, we had the Light Up the Holidays Christmas tree auction, and it was a great event this year. The club did their winter wonderland, and we were part of that event, and it was a great event. I want to thank David Sawyer and the club. We raised a record amount of money. We did it online, and we had a little people competing at Jules, and ended up at the last minute getting some crazy bids in. So it was kind of fun to watch. They were competing at the bar down there. So anyway, that's a great event. We'll be doing it again this year. And I think that's it. In closing, look for updates throughout the year on our upcoming project. We'll be working a lot with Peter Quinn and Chris McCall in doing the site planning. We also have a monthly Keepers Times that if you aren't getting it, you can subscribe to it from our website, obaldi.org. And we also every month contribute to the Bald Head Association Island Report, and we appreciate that. So that's it, and thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your fine update. Kevin Arata will speak on behalf of the village and bring us up to date, the village chapel, and bring us up to date on its fine work.
Thank you, Alan. So I'm Kevin, as Alan said, Communications and Technology Chair on the board with the Village Chapel, and I'm speaking today on behalf of Gail Sanders and the rest of our Board of Trustees. So you've heard a little bit of this already and how COVID has impacted all of us on levels we've never seen before or expected, and for so long. Well, we've certainly been no exception to that. The silver lining for us, I'll get to in a little while. Our attendance this past year was 4 times the amount of the attendance in 2020, and our community outreach continue and are as strong as ever. And we've also continued to host weddings and special events throughout the year. But let me begin with the worship services. Clearly, COVID has hit us and the nation hard in 2020 as we struggled to find ways to prudently gather in prayer. Over the last year, just over 3,200 people joined us in worship. In 2020, when COVID began, just over 800 people joined us in worship. So we've seen a 4-fold increase in attendance over the past year since COVID began. For the previous 10 years prior to COVID, our annual attendance was around 6,000 worshipers, so about twice of last year's attendance. I mentioned the silver lining earlier. The good news is that we're in line with church attendance across the country, according to Barna Group, which is a research firm that studies faith in the United States, which says that the average church attendance is down about 30 to 50%. So we're within that window, which tells me that we're doing something right as we find ways to help celebrate our faith during COVID. So how have we done that? We've remained flexible. We found new ways to do things, and we've had many people to help us along the way. Here's just a few ways we've continued our worship opportunities. This past summer, we upgraded our audio capabilities at the chapel, allowing us to broadcast our service outdoors. This allowed people to sit outside and listen to the service while taking in the serenity of the chapel courtyard. And this still did allow for some in-person socialization. We're not done there yet. There are still some small upgrades to be made, but we're getting there. Over the past year and a half, we've pre-recorded some services, at least a dozen of them, and we've posted them to YouTube and Facebook. Jack Pless spent countless hours filming and editing worship services when we first started this process, as we learned about all the different ways that churches were still hosting worship services in a prudent manner. And thanks to Claude Pope for letting us hold many worship services under his Maritime Market tents this last winter, even providing us propane heaters to help keep us warm on those cold winter mornings last year. And we've tried outdoor courtyard services with a portable microphone system. And we've done indoor socially distanced worship services like we're doing now. And we've done regular services with masks with full capacity. And we've tried to do live broadcasts of services, but we still have some work to do there due to some limitations we've faced. It all boils down to this, though, that we're focused on providing you all with the worship opportunities while keeping safety of our worshipers in mind. There have been countless hours from many people, all volunteers and all chapel stewards, to help ensure that celebrating our faith remains a viable option on Bald Head Island. From a community outreach perspective, we stayed engaged with the Southport Oak Island Interchurch Fellowship, a community of churches in Brunswick County, contributing to their food bank and conducting drives to help those in need. Most recently, we partnered with the BHA Club to help 200 families in need across Brunswick County with this year's Angel Tree Project. The previous year's Angel Tree Project helped 75 families. So we upped our game and more than doubled those who we were able to assist, all because of the graciousness of you, our community of Islanders who want to help others. And for that, we're thankful. From a special events perspective, we've co-hosted the annual Memorial Day ceremony with the Old Baldy Foundation in the chapel. We've co-hosted the 9/11 20th anniversary commemoration ceremony with the village in the chapel courtyard, with participation from the village manager, the police chief, and our public safety officers. And we hosted 24 weddings or vow renewals over the course of the last year. We take our jobs seriously here, and we do it because we care. We've got 2 wonderful full-time staff, a great board of volunteer trustees, and a host of other volunteers all across the island serving on communities to make this chapel work, just as you've heard from Alan and the others today about folks who are helping make the island come together and work as a team. We're very appreciative of all those who provided their time and their resources, and it's truly a team effort to allow for worship here at our chapel. So what lies ahead for next year? We'll continue to find ways to allow our community to worship safely and smartly, following CDC and the state of North Carolina guidelines. And of course, our community outreach efforts will continue, as will our hosting of special events and weddings. We've already got 25 weddings, vow renewals, and first looks scheduled, and it's only January. So we're certainly headed in a positive direction. I encourage you to watch our Facebook page, check out our website, and watch the Maritime Market's daily email blast for the latest news from the chapel. And then finally, for a brief plug on worship services over the next few weeks, our Building and Grounds Committee has contracted to refinishing the floors and pews in the chapel in February, so starting next weekend. And during that time, we'll be holding services in the Bald Head Islands Association Generator Society Hall. We'll be pushing out reminders in our usual places to ensure that you know that worship services will go on. So thank you again for all that you as a community do to make the Village Chapel place a special place that we can all worship, because without you, we could not do what we do.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin. Appreciate your update on behalf of the village. Next, I would like to call on Chad Paul, the Chief Executive Officer of Bald Head Island Limited, to update us with regard to Limited.
Thank
Chad?
you, Alan. I appreciate the opportunity. I'll start with 2021 and what's happened really in the last 18 months relative to just developer operations. So right before COVID hit, we entered into 2 transactions to continue to move and transition the stewardship of certain operations and businesses that we've owned and developed over the years to others. The biggest 2 that happened in the last 18 months were transitioning our vacation rental management business to Intercoastal Realty as a vacation rental management platform, as well as transitioning simultaneously our third-party brokerage real estate operation, residential real estate operation, to Intercoastal. That also include the sale and the transition of our laundry facility and back office facility in the Edward Teach extension area, as well as our former third-party brokerage real estate office out at the marina. The developer continues to keep its residential and commercial developer operations, but all third-party stuff, we will not be representing Islanders independently anymore. We've transitioned those businesses off. In addition, as another big milestone that I'm sure David Sawyer will bring up, that's really was in the works for 20 years, but really heavily in the last 10, that David had to kind of inherit the handoff here. It really goes back to the tribute really to Gene Ram and Brad Smith that we did transfer and follow through with the transition and transaction where Limited sold effectively its Swans Quarters property to the club to enable its long-term expansion. And again, that transaction was really 10 years in the making, and a lot of things had to happen. Shoals Club merger, all those kind of things had to happen. And we were able to get that done effectively. And again, David had to inherit a situation where we had Duke Energy tied up right in the middle of that whole thing we were supposed to close. And it was almost a kind of a quasi disaster, but we got it done. Also, another big event that Chris Webb brought up, we had worked probably now for 2 years with Mark Prack and Old Baldy on the Ballastone Alley site in conjunction with the Historic District on how we go ahead and create a stewardship opportunity for that site. And that worked out well. Mark's leadership with Chris Webb and others in that was really instrumental, and we were able to get that set up for Old Baldy long term. Before I get into 2022 and where we're headed in 2022, everybody's looking for a stir the pot comment regarding transportation. We're not going to do that. Frankly, I want to first off say that I have a good and solid relationship with Peter, and we are going to be frank and open about how we feel about things. And we've already started that since Peter's been involved, and did that prior to him sitting down and becoming mayor. So I look forward to those interactions going forward. As it relates to transportation, going back 4 years ago when we had several community meetings with the island stakeholder groups. Since those times, politics, and that's really what it is, political nonsense at the state level and everywhere else, has created a dynamic that makes it difficult. Notwithstanding, myself and Chris McCall and our team members have all sat down way prior to this becoming the dumpster fire that it is, and basically said, we are going to compartmentalize everything and we're going to keep it separate. And we're going to continue to do what we need to do to work together on everything else. And the community needs to just look no further than the recent fire to say that those relationships at all levels are solid and in good working order. Because if they weren't, we wouldn't have been able to deliver the barge with that backup fire equipment within an hour and 15 minutes of getting the call. So we need to look no further that the working relationships at all levels related to transportation and everything else we've got going on the island are good with the village and all the constituents and stakeholders. Another example of that would be folks are like, they wonder why we're off schedule 5 to 8 minutes. And then by the end of the day, we're off schedule an hour. That is solely a function of the dredging equipment that's out off of Battery Island that was there all summer. And what happens is our boats can't go by and blow wake and take all that out. And it results in about 5 to 8 minutes per trip all day long. And the problem is it catches up at 4:30 to 6:30 at night. And it becomes a problem because we lose the ability to transport 300 passengers at the worst possible time. We've worked collaboratively with Chris, with others, to try and make sure that that dredge material is not staged there in front of Battery Island, taking up about 40% of our trip. We were told that we missed that opportunity for this year's window when we had to deal with it for 3 years in a row. Notwithstanding, the dredge contractor by itself has gone ahead, at least on the front end of the project, and have moved that up further up in the coastal waterways. So we're not experiencing that right now. I would just suggest that I'm not sure how that's going to be in the middle of the season, if they're going to be back or not. I don't know how that'll work out, but we think we have a good plan in the future to work with the other communities that are dredging to make sure that that's not there and impacting the on-time performance situation. Also, too, with COVID protocols, the final transportation passenger reductions protocols went off last May. It's difficult sometimes to remember that operations on the mainland, we fall under the jurisdiction of Southport. So if they've got a separate or different mask policy for inside or outside, we have to follow that there. Then we might have to on Bald Head. And we've got the governor, we've got the Coast Guard right now is the heavy lifting on the mask mandates on the boats. That's coming directly from them. So we have everybody, I'm sure the NBA and the NHL and the USFL have their say in our day-to-day operations, and we try to work that all out and make it all work. But we communicate well with Peter and Chris McCall. Where are we with the authority? My sense is that there's a lot of political nonsense going on. The Mitchells have a mandate. I would suggest if you look at the history, it's kind of somewhat typical of Bald Head. It's either or, and I would suggest it's and. And the either or is, it appears that either you're for the authority or you're for the village, and it's a zero sum, right? Winner losers. I would suggest there's probably an equally large group of and that and is just keep it private and let it be regulated like it is today and move on. And given the fact that the Mitchells have made a great deal of investment and time into the public trust platform with authority, and that does not seem to be going where it needs to go, they are pursuing keeping it private and keeping it regulated. And my sense is we'll hear something from those discussions in the coming weeks, and I'll be working directly with Peter and Alan and other constituent stakeholders on where that shakes out, so that it's not going to be to anybody's surprise on where that is. In terms of 2022, we're going to continue the remaining residential real estate development and sales, the developer sales and development, and continue with the remaining commercial real estate sales and development. You saw on the slide early on about how many properties are left. It's going to come to a shock to some. Baldheim Unlimited has less than 12 standing lots in the association that are undeveloped and remaining. So of the 700 or so lots that are out there that are accounted for by the association, the developer has 12 that are left. We have 3 PUD tracks that we could convert to residential. I think we'll look to do that with the association and the mayor. But that's where we are from a residential perspective. So I know that there's still a misunderstanding or a miscalculation out there in the community that we have 400 standing lots to develop. We do not. We have 10. Again, PUD tracks, we could probably add another 30 or 40, but I'm not sure that's going to be our intent. So we just need to, again, work with the transition, as Peter said, on how we're going to transition some of this stuff. We'll also be working with the village, the association, the club, the conservancy regarding other strategic issues to include permits, stormwater, and other real estate that's non-developable that each stakeholder really, needs to have in their world. An example might be, we might own a piece of non-buildable property that's next to one of the beach accesses. Well, we all know the beach access situation we have now. Well, that we need to work with the association and everybody on that, but frankly, that's probably a village piece that we need to talk about. I've talked to David Sawyer about some of the history there. We might own like a 1-foot strip between the golf course and somebody's property. Well, in the old days, that 1-foot strip would be used as some kind of blocking or trading mechanism or not. Those days are gone. That 1 foot probably should go to David. He needs it. He's using it now. That's how we need to work with the club and work with David and his team. And same thing with the association. We have 51 pieces of non-buildable property around the island. Some of that should go to Silt and the Conservancy. Some of that should go to the association. But we're going to work with everybody on that map. We're going to work with everybody on that stuff so that no one feels like they're being left out, and everybody can raise their hand and say, "Oh, wait a second, that piece is strategic to get towards one of the lagoons." It's like Mr. Drummiller said, who's going to be responsible for the lagoons? Well, that track probably needs to go with them. So we're going to be working on that. In 2022, we'll also be moving several of our employees and departments off island to the mainland. Primarily our residential construction groups will start to move off the island and move to the mainland to support our Project Indigo Phase 2 and our other activities on the island. With COVID, we've learned also too that in terms of accounting, legal, things like that, probably don't need to have them on the island. So we will relocate all of those to Chandler, and a great deal of that will be moved off in 2022 in order to support our mainland activities. Kind of the last big news is in 2022, we're going to continue to transition with the assets and businesses and commitments to the island's long-term vision and stewardship. And to that end, the Mitchell family in the coming month will be formally announcing the sale of the 3 iconic cottages known as Captain Charlie's. We all know the cottages are revered symbols of the island and the story's past, as well as its resiliency. We're going to sell the homes as a compound together collectively with deed restrictions and stipulations, ensuring they remain as they are today. And the fact that the cottages would be restored and sold as a compound, a historic compound, is again a testament to the Mitchells' continued love of the island and stewardship of the island. In that regard, we have definitely taken care of what we need to take care of when it comes to the Conservancy and their expansion needs and their issues, primarily with stormwater, and how we're going to manage that whole process. So stay tuned with that. We'll probably have more information on Captain Charlie's and his transition here in the next 30 days. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate your very helpful and informative report to us. And appreciate all you do for us and on behalf of our island. Thank you. Next, I'd like to call on Cam McIntyre. Well, Cam is not here and unable to join us today. She does have a slide, I believe. I don't know whether there's more on the slide than what I'm looking at right now. But if there is, go to the next slide. If there's not, then I would next like to call on Chris Shank, the Executive Director of the Conservancy. Chris, are you available to speak to us now?
I am. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
Right. I do have a presentation prepared that I think Carol will get together, so we can get started. Making sure that pops up. Okay, so Carol, I believe some of these are going to be just individual clicks before we say go to the next slide. I'll probably just say click if that works for you. So good morning, everyone. I appreciate y'all giving us a chance to talk about what we've done in the Conservancy in 2021. And I guess I started this about 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago when I came. We talked about just some of the things that we are learning at the Conservancy and that people really liked hearing about and sharing. I think, and that's a really cool opportunity for us to talk about some of our work, less about the nuts and bolts of the Conservancy, but more about what we're learning and things that I think are important to the island and that hopefully that y'all enjoy learning too. And the one thing I want to mention on this line is there's a couple of we's. What we learned in 2021, well, right now that's just the Conservancy. Below that, you see our mission statement, we discover, learn, conserve, and preserve. Well, that we is also everyone on this call and everyone on the island. And when we did this several years ago with our strategic plan, that we is important. It really is meant to be all encompassing. And so what I'm going to provide today, hopefully will be interesting to you. And if you want to learn more, we are always happy to have those conversations with you. Okay, Carol, click, please. Okay, so just a little. The wildlife has been an interesting and widely discussed topic amongst islanders this year. And, you know, we always have to talk a little bit about our sea turtle activities. And so you can look in the historic past, over the past 20 years, you know, there's a lot of variability from year to year in terms of nests and false crawl. Let me define false crawl. False crawl is when a turtle comes up on the beach but goes back to the water without laying a nest, right? So if you look at this graph, it's maybe a little, you know, periodic. Every 4 or 5 years, it seems to jump up again. And then if you look at the last 3 years, 2019, 2020, and 2021, we've actually had very good nesting years. With 2019 being an extraordinary year, we had 170 nests, which is by far a record. You also notice the number of false crawls have increased, right? Well, that could be caused to a lot of things, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it could just be more new sea turtles in the water that haven't nested here before, and they're just checking us out, okay? So click, please, Carol. But I do want to focus a little bit more on 2021. So I have broken down the number of nests and false crawls per month, and you see we start getting our nesting activity starts a little bit in May, but June and July are the big months across the island. And then by the end of August, we're pretty much wrapping it up. Look at the beach comparison, East Beach, South Beach, and West Beach, the black being the number of nests and the gray bars being false crawls. Well, if you notice on East Beach, the number of nests is slightly greater than the number of false crawls. But if you look at South Beach, there's twice as many false crawls as there are nests, okay? And click for me, please. And one thing that we need to really watch out about on South Beach is exterior lighting. We had several instances this year where there was some sea turtle disorientation, some hatching disorientation. And it's even a little disconcerting for the nesting moms too, to have a lot of light out on that beach. So everyone on South Beach, if you could please make sure you're following the village's lighting ordinance, we would really appreciate it. We also have an initiative, a red light initiative for folks on the beaches. You know, white lights are not supposed to be used on the beaches at night during sea turtle nesting season. And thanks to Jim and Devin Brown, who provided a really nice gift this year, we started passing out red flashlights, and we have plenty of those. If you would like a red flashlight, come see us. We are happy to give that. Turtles cannot see it. It's not distracting to them. And it really does make a difference for our summer visitors. Okay, thank you. Click. there's the take home. High nesting the last 2 years and high proportion of false crawls in South Beach. Okay. So let's talk about a project that we got funded for from North Carolina Sea Grant a couple of years ago. As you know, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, we had a big issue with predation from coyotes on our beaches, right? So we got funding from North Carolina Sea Grant to change our cage design. We tried a few different types, and what you see here in red, that's the sea turtle nests that are active on the beach. And these dots here indicate attempts by a coyote or fox, almost 98% coyote, to infiltrate that nest. And if you notice, it's around mid-August when we start seeing some of the hatchings that the coyotes really get active, okay? Now, the great thing is, if you notice, the dark circles means they failed. Only a few of these empty circles are where they were successful. And this was not the case a couple of years ago. So we feel really good about how we have redesigned our cages to keep the coyotes out. And that is a big deal. And when we had the big problem in 2019, we lost more than 2,000 eggs. And this past year, we lost just 150 or 200. So a big difference. And this design was really helpful. And we're getting ready to publish a study on this. So sea turtle entities across the Southeast coast will have this information. Okay, next. This is just highlights a little bit of where most of our predation activities. You can see the southwest corner and the southeast corner. These tend to be a little darker and a little more mysterious. So the coyote dens are probably in this area and probably back in the dunes here. So, okay, next. That's just, well, it looks like it's cut off here. The cages worked, which is really good. I can't read what it says, but our cage design worked, and that's really, really valuable information. Okay, next, please. Let's talk a little bit about deer. So this is a history of deer on the island over the past 20 years or so. And if you notice, this is not real, the population going up and down. It was going up over 300. And then this is back when the village sponsored culls. And we had almost 350, and the deer population was really struggling about this point. And we had a cull over the last, 10 to 15 years. It's pretty stable. It's gone up a little bit, but over the last 5 or 6 years, it's been relatively stable. Okay, click. And this is comparison. We do, over the last 5 or 6 years, we do 2 different surveys. We do a summer spotlight survey and a fall camera survey. And we do those for different reasons. One, because our fall camera spotlight tends to highlight the bucks because we bait things and put cameras out, and the bucks will run off everybody else, where the summer spotlight gives us a better indication of the does because it doesn't preferentially allow us to see the bucks. Okay, so if you look, it's maybe slightly stable to maybe decreasing over the past 5 or 6 years. So that's good. Okay, so click, please. Part of the challenges, though, our fawns are disappearing. If you look since 2015, 2016, we're seeing very, very few fawns on the island. If considering the number of viable does we have out there, we should be seeing 30, 40, 50 fawns each year, and we are not. I'm not saying we would be able to see all of them with our surveys, but they have dropped dramatically. I think we've only seen 3 or 4 over the past couple of years each year. And that's a big substantial decrease. Click, please. Right, so the adult deer population right now is stable, maybe declining a little bit, but the fawns are disappearing. Why? Well, I think a lot of folks are probably anticipating where we're going. Click. Right, we have coyotes, which I think everybody is well aware of at this point. And the bars don't show the number of coyotes. I don't want you to think that that's what we're talking about. It's a number of coyote sightings, but it's normalized for the amount of coverage that we go on for our missions to find and count the numbers each night. So if you look at in 2018, we saw very few coyotes typically on our surveys. But then in 2019, there was that massive jump, and that's when we had a big problem on the beaches. 2020 and 2021, a little bit more activity. Why is this? Are there more coyotes? We don't know. We don't know if there are more coyotes. They might just be becoming more accustomed to being around the humans. And so, I don't want to say that we have 5 times or 10 times more coyotes, because that's not what's happening, right? Coyotes really occupy a niche. They will push the other coyotes away. So there is a cap on the number that we can have on the island, but clearly they're becoming more visible. And that is, you see it with the scat on the roads seasonally. And one thing that we're trying to find right now is a partner to do a study on the genetics to try and understand how many coyotes there are. And so we're going to try and work on that in 2022. So click, take home from that. Coyote sightings around the island during summer have increased the past few years, and I think that's pretty consistent with what other folks are saying. Next, please. Alligators. This is some data over the last 5 years with, so 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. So what we saw in 2021 was a lot of baby alligators, 0 to 3 feet, which is good. So that's going to go up and down with different moms having litters every couple of years. If you look at the larger alligators in here, though, just a couple, right? We see some and everybody kind of knows where they are, but we don't see the population of those increasing. Alligators do a very good job of taking care of their own. I'll just leave it at that. So probably a little bit of a euphemism, but the number of small alligators that are growing to become larger or concerning alligators, that's we're not seeing that on the island. Okay, click. Go ahead and click. So lots of small alligators in 2021, but a consistent larger number of gators from year to year. Okay. So one thing that we really have tried to focus on over the past couple of years is our aquifer, our groundwater below the island. It's the village uses it for drinking water, and we want to make sure a couple of things. One, that we're maintaining the fresh water, not just the volume for the village to use, but also that our forest is going to be okay for the future. When you pull the fresh water out of the ground, it allows salt water to come around the edges. And so we've done some really important aquifer modeling. So on the top is, it's hard for me. I don't think I have the ability to show you exactly here, but the values here are representative means. So those dashed lines are the means of the volume of water or the height of water in the groundwater. In 2021 was a very dry year. Well, how dry was it and how much did we lose out of the aquifer due to lack of rainfall? Well, if you look at 2021 compared with 2009 to it's a little lower than the average, but it's not significant. So even though we had a really dry year, the aquifer volume is relatively stable over the long term. And that's really, really important for the village's use, but also for the forest. So go ahead and press click. Right, so 2021 dry, but the mean aquifer volume is relatively stable for now. And that is really, really important. Okay, next slide, please. And it leads into a forest study. So we work with Dr. Jody Forrester at North Carolina State, who's a forest ecologist. And we had a series of exclosures in the forest. And we have done some studies over the past 10 to 15 years of, do deer impact the forest, and do we need to worry about regrowth? Well, her evidence suggests that there's no clear evidence of deer herbivory impacting the forest at this time. So that was good. We have seen a significant decline in the red bay due to laurel wilt. And that's, I think all of us have seen that across the island. The trees that are completely dead all the way up are dying from the laurel wilt. We need to keep an eye on invasive species. The tree composition, this is important too with the fire. The Baldhead Woods is not a fire-prone forest type, according to Jody. But one thing that's really cool, we are going to work with the North Carolina Coastal Reserve on building a fire model, and all reserve sites, including BHA, will be part of this going forward. And that's going to be a really, really valuable tool for the village. Potential stress, and I want to emphasize this, salty winds, the more the island gets fragmented and developed, it's not just that we're losing the forest, we're also allowing salt air and salty winds to enter the forest, which is something we need to keep an eye on. You all see what salty winds do to the trees, the way it slants them. Well, that salt scour is not good. And so we just want to make sure we're protecting the trees, okay? And yep, so be mindful of our precious forest. Disturbances come quickly, recovery is slow, okay? Next. So this is important. I'm going to finish with this because this is really, really cool. And I'm really excited about this. So the official BHA Conservancy vision statement is, we champion the sustainability of Barrier Islands through environmental research and stewardship. So in order to support this, click please. I want to announce the Johnston Coastal Sustainability Center initiative. Click please. So Dick and Pat Johnston have provided a really nice gift for us to start having conversations about sustainability on the island. It's going to include multiple facets. It's going to include a coastal sustainability symposium, which will be starting this April. It's going to include some marketing communications and awareness aspects that we will work with all village entities on. It's going to include research funds for understanding sea level rise and climate impacts on our island. And I'm really, really excited about this. Press click, please. It's going to become the theme for BHI research and communications, as well as a big chunk of our education pieces going forward. And click, please. So in April, we're going to host our first annual Coastal Sustainability Symposium. I will send out more details later. We will have some room for the public to attend, and we would love for everyone to participate in this idea going forward. Click, please. More details to announce in the coming weeks. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you got questions, be thrilled to talk with you about this. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, for the excellent report on behalf of the Conservancy. We're all delighted to hear how well things are going. Next, I would like to call on David Sawyer, Chief Executive Officer of Bald Head Island Club and the Shoals Club. David, are you available?
I am. Thank you all. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Right. We also have a PowerPoint presentation. Carol is going to be queuing up that we will dig into in just a moment. We know how important the clubs are to all the stakeholders on the island. So we wanted to share a few brief data points this morning just to let you know how the health of the clubs are doing. And we'll start off with this next slide. So it's been a historic year for both the clubs with membership, food and beverage, golf, tennis, croquet, fitness, and usage throughout all of the amenities. Membership is the primary business of the clubs, and right now the Bald Head Island Club has 1,564 primary members. 350 of those are full members. This past year, the club reached a cap of full memberships. We currently have 22 members on the waiting list for full membership. We had we actually had 299 membership transactions in 2021. To put that in perspective, the club over the past 10 years averaged 1,700 guest memberships at the Bald Head Island Club. The Shoals Club has 737 primary members. Shoals Club had 119 membership transactions from real estate, and 77 Bald Head Island Club members joined the Shoals Club this year. Next slide. We wanted to share a few brief data points on the clubs. It was a tremendous year, a historic year for both clubs. The Bald Head Island Club had $16.7 million in revenue. It's not listed here, but the Shoals Club had just over $5 million in revenue in 2021. Membership dues was $7.5 million, and we touched upon the number of membership transactions. We had over 600 members participate in the guest membership program where they're renting their homes. We had just over 300 Shoals Club members participate in the same program. And the club generated $1.5 million from guest member fees. That's not including any usage of the club. And it's important to note that the club is a not-for-profit entity. So any excess funds that are generated at either club at the end of the year are used to reinvest back into the capital projects of the club, as well as setting up contingency funds for storms and other events. Next slide. Member usage and all the amenities, as I touched upon, increased dramatically in 2021. Golf rounds went up to 28,000. Member rounds make up 85% of all the golf rounds played at the Bald Head Island Club. This past year, the club's golf course notched up another ranking in the top 100 golf courses in America. Golf lessons increased 25%. We are working hard to introduce the game to new golfers and to try to get lapsed golfers to come back to the game. Tennis and pickleball activity increased over the prior year. Next slide, please. The aquatics complex at the Bald Head Island Club had over 87,000 swimmers in 2021. That's compared to 50,000 the year before, which did have restrictions because of COVID and 50% capacity issues. The Kids Camp program was extremely popular. It had over 1,000 participants in 2021. The Croquet Association has added 25 new members and established a much more robust social calendar to help grow the sport. And the fitness operation added 3 more group exercise programs throughout for each week throughout the year. Next slide. Restaurant revenues increased 70% this past year. Horizons alone was the most popular restaurant at the club, increased revenue $900,000 over the prior year. The club has changed reservation systems this winter to better serve our members. We promoted Chef Caitlin at the Shoals Club to be the senior executive chef over both clubs and Horizons. Next slide. So we've kept the Shoals Club open on weekends this winter. That was to provide better value to our members and to also provide full-time year-round employment for our key staff. We're planning to reopen the Sandbar Grill this summer season. We're adding a Starbucks coffee station at the Shoals Club this spring. We've purchased additional beach chairs and umbrellas. We're upgrading landscaping around the Shoals Club. And we're working on plans to renovate the dining rooms. That renovation will likely occur next winter at this time. Next slide. So as with most of the businesses across America, staffing has been one of the biggest challenges. And the past 20 months has been pretty challenging for both clubs. We've had some success though. In 2021, we hired 100 employees is 225. A lot of the credit is due to a new HR manager that we brought on board and helping us with a whole lot of our programs and workforce development tactics to try to grow our employee base. We do hope to continue to expand our employee base for this coming year so that we can increase capacity in many of our amenities. And we're hoping that all of our staffing plans will allow us to continue to improve service for our members. Next slide. As Chad mentioned, we acquired the 5-acre Swans Quarter Salt Meadow property in 2021. And this was a long transaction in the making. And thank you, Chad. Thank you, Gene Ram, the Board of Governors of the club, for your leadership in helping to see this through. It's been vacant, unused land next to the club for many years, and we're excited to start to put together plans to develop it and really complete the club campus. We also completed a bunch of other maintenance projects, deferred maintenance projects, and then some other projects to expand amenities this past year. One of the issues was touched upon with the BHA, and that was managing our lagoons much more proactively. Next slide. So the board is working on a master plan, and the first phase of that are things that are exciting projects that are happening this year. The grill renovation is underway. Demolition was complete last week. New framing is underway currently. The new grill renovation will have a preview slide in a moment. We'll also have new flooring, furniture, and lighting, and it's on schedule to open this April. We also have a new convenient entrance for tennis court, tennis area, and pools. That project and we're upgrading Horizons, soundproofing, lighting, coffee bean bar, and we're also doing an adult pool deck expansion. The lap pool area will have a landscape upgrade, and we'll be adding 100 additional chairs for this coming season. Next slide. So the board is working on a 5 to 10 year master plan. We have some phase 2 projects that we're working on. This includes a kitchen renovation and expansion, 2 additional tennis courts, 4 pickleball courts, an event lawn, and then some campus work where we're going to improve the traffic flow for the overall club campus and add additional parking pods. Next slide. Some of the long-term projects for this master plan, what we would call phase 3, would be a substantial fitness expansion. This would create functional training areas, group exercise areas, Pilates and yoga areas. We'll have a new fitness entrance. Would also have a new golf shop, bag drop, cart staging area, and a state-of-the-art golf instruction bay with golf simulator. Next slide. This plan is posted in the lobby of the club, and it's also available on the club website. Happy to answer questions about it. As you can see from the club master plan, it incorporates the full Swans Quarter Salt Meadow land tracts, and that involves primarily the expansion of tennis and pickleball, and then some sports lawns, recreation lawns on that property. We also improve the traffic flow loop and the parking all throughout the club areas. Next slide. This is a preview. Next slide. This is just an aerial view of the floor plan layout for the grill renovation. Next slide. Horizons, we're doing an update to Horizons. It's not a full-scale renovation since the restaurant is only a couple years old, but the restaurant does have some flaws in its original design. So we're improving the lighting, the soundproofing, and the traffic flow for Horizons. So it will be a much more appealing restaurant this season. Next slide. The really unsightly area between Horizons and the tennis courts, we're finally cleaning that up, and we're creating a proud new entranceway for all of the swimmers and tennis users at the club. With over 80,000 people passing through this area every year, we wanted to create a much more appropriate entranceway for tennis and pool. Next slide. So with fitness, we touched upon some of the expansion areas. We did a master planning survey for all members of the Bald Head Island Club this past year. And one of the #1 priority projects was an improved fitness center complex. We've way outgrown the current complex, and in today's world, for the lifestyle needs of our members and future members, this will become one of the top priorities of our future phase of master planning. Next slide. One of the other elements, which is popular in the golf world today, not just for golf practice, but also for entertainment, is golf instruction bays and golf simulators. This is also going to be a priority for our future phase master plan. Next slide. So in summary, it sounds like for many of the entities on the island, it's been a windows of exclusivity for our members at both clubs. And we look forward to continuing to improve our relationships with all of the other island entities. So we want to thank our members for their tremendous support of the clubs, and we thank you all for your time this morning.
Thank you, David. I appreciate your excellent report, and it sounds like a lot of exciting things are going to continue to be happening at your clubs. Thank you. We now move to the questions or comments phase and of our annual meeting. If you have any questions, you have to click the raised hand phase to ask a question, and you'll be prompted then to unmute yourself when it is your turn to speak. So are there any questions or comments?
And it looks like we do have, Alan, one gentleman, John Bulls, and I am going to allow you to speak. If you would please introduce yourself and tell us your property location on Bald Head Island and ask your question, please. And you do need to unmute. I've just sent you an ask to unmute. If you see that, you can unmute yourself. Mr. Bulls, if you're there, do you have a question for us today? Okay, and we will move on to the next person. Let's see. So I do see a raised hand for Trisha Johnson. And let's see. So I will allow you to speak. And if you could introduce yourself, Ms. Johnson, and tell us where you live on Bald Head Island and your question, please.
I am Trisha Johnson. My husband and I purchased property at 109 Kitty Hawk Way in 2020. Our first visits to the island were all the way back in 1997. And I guess my question is for Peter. One of the things that encouraged us in purchasing a property was the Vision 2025 document that the village had put together that really focused on the conservation of the island, moving all of the contractor vehicles to electric vehicles, et cetera. But I haven't heard much discussion about that since we've purchased. And I just wanted to see if you could give an update on that Vision 2025. And is that still something that's in play in terms of the future of the island? Thank you.
All right, let me just check with my board here to see who is best qualified to respond to that.
It's Peter. It's Peter.
I can answer. Please excuse, I get some reverberation. We have some technical difficulties on my side. I'm going to turn this other piece off. Okay, see if that works. Is that better? I can't hear myself now. But,
yes, Peter, that is better.
The
Thank you.
2025 vision, it's not in the forefront, not that it's being ignored. It's just not a point of reference on a regular basis. In the plans of when I talked about different master plans that I feel as though we need to be addressing, all those, the 2025 plan comments that we've been collecting over the years will all come up, and we'll be going back and looking at those. The 2025 plan, our island is constantly evolving, and some of the issues that were brought up then are still strong issues, but there's new issues that have come on board, and all these have to be incorporated at the same time. Not sure that answered your question, but the real answer to your question is no, it's not something that we're looking at constantly or using as a point of reference.
Is there someone else with a question?
Yes, Alan, let's see, we have a few more popping up. So the next one in line is one of our panelists, Robert Drumheller. So let's see if you want to unmute yourself, Robert, and go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Pam. Two quick questions for David at the club, Bizon. They both relate to the Shoals Club. The first question is, during 2021, did the Shoals Club operate cash flow positive? Were cash revenues in excess of cash expenses? And then the second question with respect to the Shoals Club is, could you just talk for a second about what your thought process is and plan is for this barrier that's under construction in front of the kiddie pool in the ocean?
Absolutely, Mr. Drumheller. Thank you. Yes, the Shoals Club was produced positive cash flow in 2021. It was over $600,000 positive cash flow. And the Shoals Club has a healthy cash position with over $2 million in cash assets on the balance sheet. The project out on the Shoals Beach is a repair project of a beach fence. The club has had a beach fence for years that had fallen into disrepair. And so we were approved by the village and CAMA to be able to repair that beach fence and put it into place. So anyone that's on the island that's down by the Shoals Club will see some pilings and a beach fence project that's currently underway. We anticipate completing that project within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions?
Okay, let's see. So we did have some attendees with hands raised, but they have lowered them. So this is the time. If anyone has questions, please raise your hand. Oh, I do see one popped up. Let's see, Mr. Charlie Scott, and I will allow you to speak. And if you will unmute yourself. And please
yes,
ask your
a question for
I'm sorry, Mr. Scott, if you could please identify your location on Bald Head Island, please.
Okay, it's Charlie Scott, and we're at Timber Creek, and we've been on the island since the early 80s. Just a question, as you can tell by that, I'm a senior citizen, and for the senior and junior citizens, there's actually a need for some strategic bathroom facilities on the beach, along the beaches. Has any thought been given to doing that?
Mayor, are you best able to respond to that?
I think so. Bathrooms are a big issue on the island, and we're aware of the fact that there's no bathrooms right now available at the near the marina area, and also when you get down to the beaches, very limited facilities. There's a problem with both the commercial activity around the Edward Teach area, and also with the Conservancy, that people are using their toilets. And it's just not an acceptable situation. We have done some quick studies. There's still quick studies, and we've also approached Chad Paul about trying to earmark some properties that the village might be able to acquire to locate facilities in both those locations. And so the issue is forefront, and it was actually part of our last council meeting, the discussion about trying to find lands to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Appreciate the question.
Are there any further questions or comments?
And I have no new raised hands. So again, just last call for anyone who has a question, please click on the raised hand icon at the bottom of your screen. And I don't see anyone raising their hands, Alan.
All right, we will move to the final portion of the meeting, announcement of the 2022 annual election results. I am pleased to report that Joe Bronner and John Kinney have been elected to the board. My congratulations to them, and congratulations and thanks to all of the candidates. We appreciate your efforts and volunteering, and I encourage everyone to go forward. All bylaws passed and all covenants passed as well. That brings our meeting to a conclusion. I thank all of you members for being members, and we're here. If you have questions or there's anything we can do to assist, please call on us. Thank you very much. Wait a minute. I forgot something. I forgot that John Fisher is going to leave us. We are all very sad about that. But let me help a little bit by presenting to John the certificate you see in front of him, in front of you, and let me give him the original. Personal thing.
Serve the association. Thank you. Thanks to all.
I think if I wouldn't have done that, he wouldn't have been off the board. So maybe I shouldn't have done that. But in any event, thank you, John. John's been a tremendous support to us, and I appreciate it. And again, my thanks to all of the members for attending today. And again, let us know if we can help you in any way. Thank you all. Bye-bye. I think that's it. Okay. No, we don't have a